panelist, Julio Portalatin, who received his bachelor's degree in business administration and an honorary doctorate from Hofstra University. He's also a member of the university's Board of Trustees. Julio is President and Chief Executive Officer of Mercer LLC, a leading global consulting firm that helps clients around the world advance the health, wealth, and careers of their most vital asset, their people. Julio leads more than 20,000 employees who support clients in over 140 countries. Under his leadership, Mercer has experienced significant growth through expansion into emerging markets, broadened investments to $135 billion in assets under management, and leading the health and benefits industry in private exchange markets. Julio has driven Mercer's groundbreaking research on gender equality in the workforce and speaks around the world on a variety of topics. He regularly shares opinions and perspectives on media, including CBS, CNBC, Fortune, and CEO magazine, as well as media in Brazil, Singapore, India, Spain, and the United Kingdom. Before joining Mercer in 2012, Julio spent 20 years at American International Group, AIG, where he held many global senior positions, including his last role as President and Chief Executive Officer of the Growth Economies. Prior to AIG, Julio spent 12 years with Allstate Insurance Company in various executive roles in product underwriting, distribution, and marketing. Julio actively supports several nonprofit organizations, including the American Cancer Society, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, Wounded Warriors, and participates in the annual Covenant House Executive Sleep Out to combat youth homelessness. It's a pleasure for me to introduce Julio Portalatin.
I'm going to take the liberty of saying thank you, Herman, for that introduction. Since we see each other quite regularly at the board meetings, so I think I can be on a first-name basis. I'm really pleased to be here today. It's great to come back. Is the Rathskeller still around? Oh, great. Okay, I got great memories from that place. I can take up the entire 10 minutes just talking about those memories, but we'll leave those for another day or maybe at the cocktail hour if you want to ask me some stories about that. But I really have taken an incredible amount of my foundational base from the time that I was here at Hofstra. And it's not so much what I learned, it's what I had the opportunity to practice while I was here. Things like questioning assumptions. Things like running to problems to solve them. Things like channeling curiosity and learning to use failures as opportunities. Those things, my friends, are the ones that separate those that just apply the theory of what you learn to those who are successful in applying the practical application of what you learn. And it also makes a distinction in success. So no mistake about it, those things make a difference. I am so happy to hear what Kathy and Stella had to say was on CEOs' minds. First, because those are the two things that are on my mind as well, so it's nice to be in good company. But it's also validated by the fact that I go around the world, I speak to a lot of C-suites, and trust me that those things are high on their list all over the world, not just here in the United States. I'm also really happy to hear that talent always is number one, because of course Mercer is the largest talent consultancy in the world. So as mentioned, 21,000 employees, 140 countries, and $4.5 billion in revenue. And the reality is that we spend a lot of time trying to help the C-suite understand how to outperform in the attraction and retention of talent. That's one of the biggest things we do. We also work hard in trying to understand how longevity is going to impact. Well, there's one thing, and if you're not studying or taking a look at this, there's no one thing more important about what's happening today and what's happening tomorrow that will affect society and economics than the fact that people are living longer. and they're going to live longer and healthier. There's nothing in the world that doesn't get impacted by that one intersection. And of course, things like, how do you deal with healthcare costs as that happens? How do you deal with retirement savings? Are they adequate or they're not adequate? How do you build opportunity for people to be in a position where they're building healthy, longer lives, both in their health and in their wealth, not just one or the other? And so Mercer's kind of in the middle of all that in the entire globe. So I'm glad that the first two speakers thought that we were quite relevant to what's happening in the world. And it's actually a really proud moment to have the opportunity to be the CEO of a company that makes such a difference. We touch over 125 million individuals every year with the things that we do. Not many companies do that. And through 28,000 corporate clients, and as mentioned earlier, in several countries across the globe. I'm also really, really pleased to hear the globality of the comments that were mentioned earlier, because it's so important to understand that the world is a lot more than the U.S. And be quite frankly, in the years to come, the world outside of the U.S. will be more important than it ever was before. So today, by the way, just in the emerging part of the world, about 40 to 45% of the world's GDP now is controlled by that world. Soon enough, that'll be over 50% of the world's GDP. Mercer was founded 75 years ago. Today, it's 50% US, 50% everywhere else. When it was first founded, it was 80% Canada, 20% US. It was founded in Canada. So this dramatic changes are taking place right before us. So when people say, yes, a lot of the foundational base of what we learned in the past is always going to apply in the future. Those things I talked about early, running to problems. All right, that's why I'm glad that Hofstra has really moved in the area of entrepreneurship. Because what is entrepreneurship at the end of the day? It's about taking risks. It's about measuring risk reward. It's about running to problems. It's about looking for the new challenge, the next new challenge. That's what entrepreneurship is all about. I remember I have a brother who really loves penguins. I don't know, it's his thing. And he looks a little bit like a penguin. But anyway, there's stories of penguins always comes to his mind. And one story always hits me in terms of taking risks and being an entrepreneur. And so you could just imagine a floating iceberg and a bunch of penguins on top of it. And they're all getting hungrier and hungrier and hungrier as days go on. They're looking in the water, they see a lot of fish, but they also see sharks in the water. And every day they're getting hungry and hungry and hungry, waiting for that first penguin to take the dive, right? To show them the way, to be able to take that risk, to assess that risk reward and come out successful. So, sooner or later, someone gets hungry enough and decides to take the dive, grabs a fish, comes out unscathed. So you can imagine the other penguins say, Second one dives in, does the same thing, comes back unscathed. Third one comes in, goes in, doesn't come out. So what's the moral of that story? Running to the problem early, assessing risk reward early, usually drives success. Fast followers usually can be somewhat successful. Laggers rarely are. So think about that penguin story the next time you think about whether it's worthy to take that risk, whether it's worthy to be that bold, whether it's worthy to be first, whether it's worthy to be second, and certainly whether it's worthy to be third. So we're always thinking about these different scenarios of how you make success happen and what are the traits that would be successful. Okay, so I look around this room, and I'm going to say that 55 to 60% are women in this room. By the way, that's a great indicator. About 60% of the global undergraduates in college are women today. Much different than when I went to school many years ago. And about 40% in the US are MBA, or in the MBA. So it's a little bit still the other way in the MBA ranks. But what does that really mean in terms of what's going to happen in the future? By the way, about 80% of decision makers in business today are still men. Only 3% are women in CEO jobs. So flip it now. We're talking about the next 50 years. I don't know if I want to go out 50 years, because I don't know about you. I have no idea what's going to happen in the next 50 years. I do know what's going to happen in terms of trends in some of these numbers I just mentioned. So by the year 2040, about 40% of CEOs, 30 to 40% of CEOs will be females. All right. By the way, that will drive GDP growth in the world faster than anything else. You know that gender diversity, if you think about it, can drive GDP growth as much as 35% in places like Egypt, as an example, if they were to achieve gender parity. Why do you think that Prime Minister Abe in Japan talks so much about being able to bring gender parity to Japan? Because of the strength that it's going to bring to GDP growth. That's basically, we could talk later about why that's the case, but I'll just leave that with you at that point. I will also tell you that the reason why we can't predict too well about what's going to happen in the next 50 years is because we have a tough time predicting what's happening in 1 year. So every year, I have the opportunity to go to the World Economic Forum in January. You people know, you know what it is, right? Okay, it happens in Davos every year, and it's the place where, I guess, the one time a year where you can somewhat get a collection of CEOs, global CEOs. You also get a collection of politicians that come in. Most of the world leaders are there to at least do one speech and leave. And then there's all the entertainers. You know, Will.i.am. You know. But by the way, follow me on Twitter. You get to see Will.i.am and also Angelina Jolie and others. You know, they have causes, right? And they go to the World Economic Forum for these causes. Anyway, the important thing is every January we'd get together, see us fellow CEOs, and we talk about what we committed to the last time we were together and how well we did in making the world a better place, because that's what the World Economic Forum is all about. The last couple of years we have found ourselves not talking so much about what we committed to and delivered or didn't deliver, but how much the world had changed in that previous year and how much we did not anticipate. Now imagine you're at the World Economic Forum, all the economists are there, all people that are supposed to know what's happening in the world, and they all get it wrong. They don't get it wrong for the next 10 years. They get it wrong for 1 year. Think about this for one moment. January 2015, we're all together, trying to figure out what happened the previous year that we couldn't figure out. Nobody predicted that oil would go to below $50 a barrel. A significant economic event missed by everybody. Nobody predicted that interest rates would continue to go down. Everybody was saying interest rates were going to go up. The combination of oil going down, interest rates continuing to go down, significant economic development. Nobody was talking about ISIS in January 2014. No one mentioned those 3-4 letters. All of that happened between January 2014, January 2015. The greatest minds in the world, nobody predicted it. So my point is, mentioned earlier, being nimble, being flexible, running to problems, taking that risk, being bold, becomes even more important in a world where historical can no longer project with great accuracy what's going to happen in the future. Is anybody studying actuarial science in here? If you are, raise your hand. You're likely to become obsolete, by the way, because the general premise of what an actuary does is analyze historical trends and project into the future. So an actuary's got to recreate themselves too to make sure that they continue to be relevant in the future. By the way, Mercer hires a ton of actuaries, okay, to do all sorts of work with pensions and pension liability matching with investments. And so we are the #1, in fact, employer of actuaries in India, for example. And so many of them, those jobs will have to be recreated as time goes on. So in the future, the facts, however muddy they may be, will definitely change in some ways that are very clear to us. So robots are going to become a much bigger part of the scenario. So our studies show by the year 2020, that's only 4 years away. I'm not predicting for 50 years out. 2020, 36% of today's skills will be obsolete in the business world. 36% in 4 short years. By the way, in 4 short years, we also believe that 50% of the workforce will be contingent workforce, not a full-time workforce that reports from 9 to 5. Significant changes, not in 40 years, not in 50, not in 30, in 4. in 4. By the way, when I was at the World Economic Forum, I don't know, anybody know the company Infosys? Okay, Infosys, a very important software development company in India. A very successful company too, by the way. And I was invited to an invitation-only event. And at the World Economic Forum, everybody has a badge. And that badge gets you either in or not in to certain events. And when you get clearance to go to an event, they get online and they give you clearance based on the badge you have. So you walk into the events and they usually take your badge number down. They check online to see if you're there. So I walk to the Infosys event, and the first thing I notice is there's no people greeting me. There's a robot. And the robot scans my admission pass and says, "Thank you, Mr. Portalatin, for attending our event. May I show you to your seat?" The robot takes me to my seat, and I'm in utter amazement, okay, as you can imagine, knows exactly where I'm sitting, says, "Please let me introduce you to Ms. Snyder, who is going to be accompanying you at your seat today." I say, "Thank you so much for that." I'm still in awe. Okay, and then the robot, I was going to say it says, okay, it says, can I get you a drink? And I'm in shock. I say fizzy water with lemon or lime. Doesn't matter to me. I never called it fizzy water, by the way, but I did that time. I was just shocked. And the response is, "Right away." Robot goes back to its station, does not get me my drink, by the way, goes back to its station to assume their role. 5 minutes later, another robot comes, serves my drink, fizzy water with both lemon and lime. Okay, so I take it, I drink it, and of course the rest of the night went something like that, introducing speakers, robots. This is real world. Autonomous vehicles will be here, probably sooner than you'd like. In the next 2 to 10 years, there's a wide span, but still short time, we will have autonomous vehicles. By the way, 50% of the world's insurance premiums, which are multiple trillions, is auto insurance. If autonomous vehicles take over, that will be eventually wiped out. So you probably don't want to go into auto insurance salesperson. Those are real things. I'm just telling you what's going to happen because that's real, okay? Now, if we're not thinking about this and how it has application to the future skills that are necessary to be successful in this environment, I think we'll be missing the boat. So entrepreneurship, incredibly important. I mentioned earlier, the globality, the fact that Hofstra now has joint partnerships with Chinese universities, et cetera. Fantastic. By the way, both of those things didn't exist when I came into school in 1981. So the evolution of being practical and relevant in today's world is something that's very apparent in what Hofstra is doing today, and you should take advantage of it. So, specifically, what do we know? So we know that we're going to have a much diverse workforce, much more diverse than we ever did before. We know that there's going to be skills that are going to have to be tapped into based on the trends that I just mentioned. So being a manager and a leader is not about gathering your team around your desk anymore and having a conversation about the daily priorities or the weekly priorities. It's about being able to do it in all sorts of media. That's much different. Why? Because the world is much more digital. That's not going to change. It's going to become more digital, not less digital. So I woke up one morning and my kids said I should be on Twitter. So I'm on Twitter. By the way, the first tweet I got was from a client. A client who said that when I went to use your services, it was not treating me well. A client that had just had a death in their family, and there was a pension check that had to be issued so that she can pay her mortgage and not lose her house. She actually reached out to me on Twitter. I tweeted her back, and I said, please contact me through email so we can get into the details of this. Within 24 hours, we had a check in her hand. Now she's an advocate. She's like an Uber-satisfied customer, right? Uber has never advertised 1 penny for their brand, but there's nobody in this room who doesn't know who they are. And by the way, satisfaction rates well into the mid-90s. Incredible brand based on one thing and only one thing, customer experience. That's it. Well, not McDonald's, who spent billions, not Coke, who spent billions. Customer experience is what makes Uber the special company that it is. So, when you think about all these things, this entrepreneurship, this broadness of how we have to apply skills, think about it in these chunks. Consumer will rule the day. Businesses that are close to consumers and customers and decision makers will sustain themselves for many years to come. Once that is interrupted is when risk enters the picture. Information and communication and technology is going to play big. Financial services, infrastructure, industries will play big. And then as a parting thought, let me just say this. My advice to prepare you for the future business is not so much all of these specific skills that apply to some of the changes that are taking place, although they are real. But my advice is simply in the 3 Ps. First, always have passion for whatever you do. The fact of the matter is that most people who have passion and believe in what they do are successful. The second P is do something purposeful. It sustains you during the bad times. Every executive, every leader, and every strategy has a bad time. And the thing that sustains you most is that you believe in the why of what you're doing. And that gets you through those bad times because you believe in it deeply. And the last thing is that everybody has the power to influence. Use it wisely. Influence positively and make it be your mantra. So I urge you not to take the responsibility lightly. It's a very big responsibility we all have. More than 30 years after I graduated, I still don't. I stand steadfast as a proud product of a fine business school education at Hofstra University. And I say that because I don't know if many of you know this, but Hofstra's original logo included the Dutch national motto, which translates to, I stand steadfast. So, being steadfast in your education, values, and your beliefs will serve you well in this rapidly changing business world, where the old frameworks of a career are melting before our eyes based on the things I mentioned before. And so think about your passion, your purpose, the power to influence. And if you can do all that, the future of business will be very bright, and the world will be in an infinitely better place. So thank